Well, if that intro is any indication of how this live stream is going to go, probably not so well. That was rough. Sorry. Hopefully, we won't have any problems as we do the stream here for the first time in what seems like forever. Probably about 2 weeks. The last time I was here with you guys, we were discussing some of the Japanese players coming over to Major League Baseball this year. You got Murakami, you got Akamoto, and now Tatsuya Amai, who I just made a video about, and the Mets being linked to him a couple days ago. So the offseason is in full swing. Winter is here. Unfortunately, the Dodgers did win the World Series. Boo. Yes, I know. Terrible times. But now it is time to discuss how the New York Mets can recover from the epic collapse that was 2025, how they can get back on the road to the postseason and hopefully to be playing deep into October to win a World Series of their own. And one of those guys that is available on the free agent market was just playing in the Fall Classic, and that is Bo Bichette. And many teams, teams, yes, for sure, are going to be going after him, including our New York Mets. So we are going to discuss, is Bo Bichette a good fit for the Mets this offseason, and talk about some of the things we're hearing right now from MLB insiders. What is up, guys? I'm Tony Metro. Long time no see. As you guys know, daily Mets content here on the channel. Be sure to leave this video a like. Really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're not already so you can stay up to date on all of the latest Mets hot stove rumors here in the fall and into the winter. And leave a comment. Sound off in the chat. I'm going to be responding to them. In fact, let's go right to the chat. Armand, loyal guy right here. What is up, my man? How are you? Good to see you. Hey, Tony, he says, I'm doing well, my man. I appreciate you. I hope you're doing well also, Armand. Good to see you. Our Jets are about to get started. I am watching the pregame coverage as we speak. So, hey, like I've said many times before, I am just a glutton for punishment. Let's see how the Jets embarrass us here once again. Tatsuya Amai. Tony, you're the man. Tatsuya, is that the real Tatsuya? If so, come play for the Mets. We would love to insert you into this rotation. We could talk about anything during this live stream. If we want to talk about Tatsuya Amai or Akamoto or Murakami, the three players coming over from Japan, we could do that. We could talk about the starting pitching market as a whole. The main focus of this is going to be Bo Bichette, but open to anything. Sound off in the chat, and we'll talk about it. Armand, I'm sorry, dropping frames. Yeah, hopefully it's doing better now. It looks okay on my side. Hopefully it's okay. Let me know, guys. Really appreciate you keeping me up to date on that. Everything looks good here on my end. Like I've said, I've tried so many times to try to figure this out, but yeah, I can see it now. It's kind of going in and out a little bit. So let me know how it sounds, how it looks right now before I go any further, and hopefully it's okay. But everything says it's okay here on YouTube. Everything says it's okay here on my desktop, but it's going in and out just a little bit, unfortunately. So hopefully no big problems, but I guess I'll just continue as if things are okay for the time being. Armand, I have a new option for second base. Instead of Bo, who this guy will cost less in years, Ha-Sung Kim, and we could take him away from the Braves, and his defense helps run prevention like Stearns has stated. Now, that is a far more realistic possibility for the Mets to go after, I think, in terms of second base. So I am totally with you there, Armand, and I would not be surprised by that. I was kind of surprised that he opted out of the deal with the Braves this year and is going to become a free agent once again. But yeah, I think that is a realistic option for the Mets. It is exactly like you said, what David Stearns stated at the end of year press conference for the 2025 Mets, that the defense needs to improve across the board. He talked about not just, of course, Pete Alonso, but really the entire team, the guys that were on this roster last year. But adding a guy like Kim is obviously going to be a cheaper option, a more defensive-oriented player for sure. But let's talk about Bo Bichette. And he's definitely someone that a lot of teams are going to be interested in. Of course, we know he was just playing in the World Series with the Blue Jays, was very nearly the World Series hero in that with his 3-run homer before, of course, the Dodgers cheated. And no, I'm just kidding. But before the Dodgers ended up going on to win the World Series. But Bo Bichette is a guy that a lot of people are going to be interested in, but likely not to be a shortstop. Now, if he stays with the Blue Jays, I think he'll probably remain at shortstop, but we have heard some murmuring, some ideas, thoughts that another team that looks to sign him may pivot and move him to second base or to third base. So we're going to go through it all right now. Let me share my screen with you guys. And like I said, this is an open forum, so we can talk pretty much anything Mets or MLB offseason here. So happy to have you guys all aboard. But let's take a look at Bo Bichette. Of course, we know that he has spent his entire career with the Blue Jays after getting drafted by them in the second round of the 2016 draft. The son of Dante Bichette, who in his own right was a tremendous baseball player himself. And he has just been tremendous, really, since debuting. So career 311 batting average, has a career 294 average, and a career 337 on base percentage. And as recently as this year, a 311 average and a 357 OBP. Now, he's not a power hitter, okay? He is not your modern day shortstop like Francisco Lindor that could pop off for 25 to 35 homers or guys like that. But he brings something to the table that just has become foreign to baseball these days, and that is getting base hits. Yes, batting average, putting the ball in play is actually a good thing, as documented by the Blue Jays, who were just a whisker away from winning the World Series this year. Or, of course, what the Brewers did before they, of course, fell apart against the Dodgers and got swept in the NLCS. But what I love about Bo Bichette is that he is not one of those guys whose value needs to be attached to his power numbers, to hitting home runs all the time. And even so, he still can give you a little bit of pop. 18 homers, 94 RBIs this past year, an OPS plus of 129, just 8 points higher than his career OPS plus. So it's not as if we're talking about a guy coming off a tremendous career season that is such an outlier and so far from the norm of what he has done throughout the rest of his time in the big leagues. This is a guy that looks like he's only getting better with age, and he's still relatively young. I believe he's 28 years old. He'll be 28 pretty much at the start of next season. So entering his age 28 season. So for me personally, this is exactly what I am looking to spend money on in terms of free agency. A guy that has not yet hit 30 years old, a guy that I still think hasn't tapped his full potential at the plate, and a guy that I think you can pretty much put him at almost any of the positions on the infield outside, of course, of first base. So let's get into it. Let's look a little deeper dive into his numbers. But first, let me go back to the chat. Tatsuya says Ha-Seong Kim was a former 5-WAR player when healthy. Yeah, Ha-Seong Kim has kind of fallen off. You know, that whole move to Atlanta was kind of strange. And again, I think even stranger that he departed and elected free agency again after, even though he had a deal with the Braves remaining, or at least 1 year on that deal. So we'll see what happens with Kim. Not a bad fallback option at all. But this is the beginning of fall, the beginning of the winter for the Mets offseason. So I am dreaming big. And that is why we're talking Bo Bichette here today. But Ha-Seong Kim, obviously a far more realistic scenario than I would think Bo Bichette is, but we'll get into it here. Armand, I think Bo moves to second with the Jays. I believe the Jays want Jimenez at short. Now, that is actually a great point there, Armand. Jimenez, we know, the former Met prospect who went in the Lindor trade, tremendous shortstop defensively. I think he has played a little bit of center field for them, if I'm not mistaken, but really was their second baseman. But you can't move Bo Bichette off a shortstop when he's the longest tenured and one of the prized prospects from their farm years ago. I think now him returning to free agency, them being that close to winning the World Series, Bichette would probably be open to the idea of moving to second if it means the best for the Blue Jays as a team. So I'm right there with you, Armand. Tatsuya says, why did Clase bet on baseball? He threw away fame and fortune, probably earned himself 30 years in prison. The last thing I saw was like 60 to 70 years in prison. And look, I will never understand it, man. These guys, for the most part, are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on an annual basis. I will never understand it. You know, who knows what kind of crowd he was running with and if he ever got into debt to them, and that's why he had to do this. And I haven't looked too deeply into it because it really doesn't affect the Mets. But as a whole, of course, we know coming on the heels of what happened in the NBA and the poker games and all the rigging of games, or, you know, rigging is kind of a, you know, serious allegation, but Terry Rozier and what he was doing in games and betting on games and props and stuff that involved himself and his team. So very strange. Baseball, sports, all are being affected by gambling, and we'll see what the leagues take, what type of initiative that they take, I should say, to try to mitigate those things. But let's get back to Bo Bichette over here real quick. So this past season was a really good year for Bo. Ended up with a 3.5 WAR, had 18 homers, 94 RBIs, like I mentioned, an 840 OPS. 2024 obviously only played half a season, as you can see, 81 games, and that clearly was the worst season of his career. It's not even close. 2020, obviously the shortened season, that would be the only year that was worse for him, and really you can't put a whole lot of stock into that year, and even so, still hit 301 that season. But you look at 2021 when he was an all-star, finished 12th in MVP voting, led the American League at least in hits that year. He likely would have also done that in 2022 had he not missed some time due to injury. And then again here in 2025, had he not missed time, likely would have led the American League in total hits once again. So we're talking about a guy that has essentially been the best pure hitter in the American League for the last 5 to 6 years. I mean, as far as putting the ball in play, getting on base, batting average, that has been Bo Bichette. So for his career, 162 game averages, has a 294, 337, 469 slash line, an 806 OPS. So look, he is not going to be the apple of the analytics guru's eye, okay? He is not going to be the darling of the analytics crew, the calculator crew, as I like to call them, okay? Because an 806 OPS is massively underwhelming for someone that we are talking about a $150+ million contract. But for me, it's the batting average. And a lot of people don't want to place stock in that. But for me, that is something that was just sorely lacking from this Mets lineup last year. And they didn't actually strike out as much as it seems. It seemed like the Mets just struck out at the worst possible times. Runner at second or third, nobody out, failing to put the ball in play. That's the kind of dynamic that I think Bo Bichette brings to this team. And not only that, but his just gamer mentality. I mean, the 3-run homer he hit in the World Series, put that aside, just always seems to be in the right place at the right time and at the plate at the right time and performing in the brightest lights. So those are a couple of kind of just things about Bo Bichette that I really like. I'm looking for the word. I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. Help me out. What am I thinking? Intangibles. The intangibles of Bo Bichette. But again, guys, 2-time All-Star, finished top 15 in MVP voting nearly 3 times, 16th in 2023, but otherwise 11th and 12th in the 2 years prior to that. He will definitely garner votes this year. We are actually going to learn who the MVPs are in the National League and American League today, so I would not be surprised to see Bo Bichette actually probably place the highest that he ever has in MVP voting. Would not be surprised if he's a top 10 vote getter in the American League, as again we will learn here this evening. Sound off in the chat, by the way. Bonus question for you: who do you think wins American and National League MVP? Juan Soto is a finalist in the NL, but we all know, of course, it's going to Shohei Ohtani because he's just everybody's favorite player, and he plays for the Dodgers, who everybody in the media just adores. But when the Mets spend, oh yeah, that's a problem. Anyway, all right, look, so let's go into the rumors here. Bo Bichette. This is actually an interesting article, and I'll be honest, I did not do my due diligence. Total Pro Sports, I've heard of them before, I've referenced them before, but don't know how much I can totally trust their credibility, but let's just read through this one here. So Bo Bichette rumors: 2 MLB powerhouses linked to Blue Jays star for the ideal second baseman. So who do you think those 2 MLB powerhouses might be? I have a hunch on at least one of them, but is the other the New York Mets? Let's find out. MLB's offseason gossip just got all more noisy in Las Vegas. Bo Bichette seems to be at the top. So we know that the GM meetings are being conducted in Las Vegas. I actually just posted a video about 30 minutes ago where I recapped everything we heard from David Stearns and from Scott Boras, of course, who represents Pete Alonso, along with a handful of other stars that are available this winter. So you can check that out at the end of my live stream here, or go watch it now and tune back in. I'll still be going. But for MLB Network's John Morosi, multiple contenders have expressed interest in Bichette as a potential second baseman or third baseman. The Dodgers, as I said, and the Mets, hey, there we go, have emerged as early suitors, both equipped with franchise shortstops and deep pockets. John Morosi said in a tweet, "Can confirm Bo Bichette has received interest from multiple teams who viewed him as a second baseman or third baseman due to the presence of an established shortstop on those rosters. Further evidence that the World Series augmented his value in the marketplace." And we know that can happen. You perform on the biggest stage of the brightest lights, like I just said, something that Bichette did tremendously. You're going to garner more attention. You're going to garner a lot more hype, and you're going to make more shkaro. So obviously, Bo Bichette did himself a lot of favors by being impressive there in the World Series. let's see if there's anything else here on this. Lazary, who is a reporter for the Blue Jays, said he and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. could go down as one of the best duos in Blue Jays history if he were to sign an extension with the club. Lazary alluded, predicting a massive 10-year, $300 million extension for Toronto's hitting machine. All right, so let me just say this first and foremost. I will not go over $200 million for Bo Bichette. I probably don't even go to 175 for Bo Bichette, even if it's spread out over 10 years. I like Bo Bichette a lot, but I don't like him for more than $175 million, much less $300 million. And you would think maybe he'd be giving the Blue Jays a hometown discount, but according to this reporter, Lazary, who covers Toronto, he is predicting a 10-year, $300 million extension. I mean, that ain't it. I am not going that far for Bo Bichette if I am the Mets. And I know the Mets won't do it anyway, so if that's the case and that's where the bidding begins, then we could just throw this entire pipe dream out the window. To the chat really quick, Armand says, if you add up all the charges, Clase and Ortiz could get up to 65 years in prison. I mean, it is insane. Like, what is going through your mind to do that? Like, if they purely were doing it for the sake of making money, then I don't know what to say. If it was because they had gambling debts or something like that with the crowd that they were involved with, then I kind of understand. But yeah, talk about throwing away talent and a future for just craziness. Let's see. Amai, please sign with the Mets. Yes, that would be amazing. My prediction is Ohtani and Judge. I hope Cal wins it, says Armand. Oh, man, it is tough. Between Judge and between Cal, I mean, Cal is a Gold Glover behind the plate. I mean, 60 home runs, switch hitter. You know, Judge obviously had still a tremendous year despite missing a little bit of time. Obviously took a little bit of a step back in right field because of that arm injury, but still, you know, it's hard. I think it's 50-50, a coin flip, but I don't know, man. So people always like to say that the media caters to the big markets. Well, that's not true, and at least not New York, okay? The Dodgers, absolutely. Los Angeles, 100%. But when it comes to New York, I really don't think so. And I think they actually kind of got a kick out of Cal Raleigh doing what he did this year on the heels of what he did last season as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cal Raleigh actually wins the American League MVP. In the National League, I think it's going to be Ohtani. It could easily be Schwarber, but I just think it's going to be Ohtani given what he just did in the postseason. And I know they don't add that as far, or are not supposed to add that as far as their evaluation for the MVP. But it's going to creep into their heads anyway, that 3 home run performance and then pitching the way he did in 1 or 2 of those games in the NLCS. I think it's going to be Ohtani. Whatever, just give it to him. If I'm a betting man, I'm Ohtani. Yeah, pretty fitting, right? Let's see. Tatsuya Amai says, I'd rather not sign Bo Bichette. I'd rather sign a pitcher like Framber Valdez or Dylan Cease. Okay. We've talked about those guys a lot in the past. I think it's an underwhelming starting pitcher market in terms of free agency. We know that Cease is available, and we know that Framber Valdez is available. Cease is younger. He'll be entering his age 30 season, but just has not found consistency, even in his time with San Diego. He concerns me a little bit in that regard. In terms of Framber Valdez, 32 years old, a lot of mileage on that arm. You know, he's been around the block here for a while. I don't know what he's looking for. I'm guessing $160 to $180 million on a 7 to 8 year deal. And I'm not sure I want to give that to a guy that is 32 years old. He's not going to get an 8-year deal unless a desperate team hands it to him, but it's the money for me with Framber Valdez. I've said it before, guys. You know how I feel. I want the Mets to make the trade for Freddie Peralta with Milwaukee. I got Frankie Montas on the mind. Jeez. So, look, there's a lot of options. I'll go through that at the end here when we kind of wrap up here with Bo Bichette. Danny Adams, okay, who do you think is better, Bo or Dante? That is a really tough question. Dante, his dad, let's see, Dante Bichette slumbers. Let's actually take a look here. Dante Bichette. I don't know off the top of my head exactly. I know he's essentially a Hall of Famer in terms of Rockies history, but is Dante in the Hall of Fame? The real West Palm Beach. There you go. How about that? All right. Career 336 on base percentage. Career 835 OPS. 274 homers. I mean, they're different players. That's the hard thing. And look, he played in Colorado where he hit 40 home home runs one year. He hit 31 another, 34 another. Obviously, the thin air effect of Coors Field is going to enhance him there. But if you put Bichette in Colorado and he played with the Rockies, he's still not going to get close to 40 or 30, 35 home runs. So I got to give it to Dante Bichette. Is he a Hall of Famer? I can't remember. I'm not going to go into the weeds too much here, but I think he might be. Oh, am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know exactly. But Dante, really good player. Bo, really good player. They're different, but I got to give it to to Dante, just because I am a power hitter kind of guy. Runner-up in MVP and a Silver Slugger in 1995. So, yeah, I'm going to give it to Dante, but good question, Danny, for sure. Damon, Bo on the Mets would be 100 fire. Absolutely, man. That would be sick. I really hope that happens. Look, we'll see. It's going to cost a lot in terms of money, and then it's going to make for some other changes that the Mets will have to do. But here's an article from Just Baseball that I was looking at before we got on here, and they are saying how Bichette could become one of the best second basemen in baseball purely because of his bat, and that a move off of shortstop makes a lot of sense for not only Bichette, but for the team that he does end up signing with here in the winter. So let's go through this. Bichette's never going to be the strongest guy on the field, they say. He knows that. So in 2025, he leaned into that weakness. It paid off with what was arguably the best offensive season of his career. Could he take the same approach on the other side of the ball, they ask? Over 7 big league seasons, Bichette has racked up negative 19 defensive runs saved, negative 32 outs above average, and a negative 27. I don't know what FRV is, but I know a negative number is obviously not a good thing. In case you think the traditional stats might treat him any better, well, his .966 fielding percentage ranks 5th last among shortstops since his debut. So all this to say, Bichette is not a good defensive shortstop. We know that. He knows that. The Blue Jays know that. Teams that are interested in him this winter know that. So it makes sense for him to go to second base, and that is why the article that referenced the tweet from John Morosi perfectly aligns with the Mets. Let's continue with this. Bichette grades out poorly on metrics that quantify both defensive range and throwing capabilities. Moving to second would mitigate those issues. After all, playing shortstop is harder than playing second, but there's more to it than that. Throughout his career, Bichette's biggest weakness has been plays that require him to run in. Negative 32 outs above average. 27 of those lost outs were on balls that StatCast sorted as in plays, as opposed to lateral or back plays. All right, so there you go. Pretty much paints the picture there. He doesn't charge the ball well, would have to do that far less at second base. It's obviously a shorter throw from second if you do have to charge a ball, and instead of having to throw across the diamond, you're basically just throwing across your body over to first base. So they lay it out very well. It's very clear Bichette, not a good defensive shortstop, but he is an excellent hitter, and that is why second base makes a lot of sense. Now, here's the problem. As I see, my frame rate is really starting to go out. So hopefully we're going to be okay here, guys. I'm going to try to monitor it here and keep things simple for a minute. The Mets obviously have a second baseman on the roster. You may have heard of him. His name is Jeff McNeil. And that is a barrier to this. But he's not the biggest barrier to this. The biggest barrier is a handful of things all wrapped into one. So you got Jeff McNeil, obviously, there. He's got 1 year left on his contract. I am praying that the Mets find a way to offload him onto some team. I don't care if the Mets have to eat the majority of that contract next year. I think it is time, and has been time, for the Mets to move off of Jeff McNeil. He is not the batting title winner that he used to be circa 2022. He has changed his approach, and yes, he had a decent season, OPS in the 750s. He had a little bit of power, but I've said it, and I'll continue to say it. He is the worst of both worlds. He does not hit for enough power, and he does not hit for a high enough average. He is basically just stuck in this purgatory of being a really average player. And I know we like that he has the defensive versatility. We like that he can play left field, right field, even stepped in a little bit in center field this year. I admire him for doing that, but let's be honest. You can find that and replace that for far cheaper. And if he's one of the roadblocks to getting Bichette to be your everyday second baseman, you find a way to ship him out. So that's number one. But like I said, there's a few things. And one of the other things is the arrival of one of the Mets' top prospects, that being Jet Williams. Williams is set to debut in 2026. It would be a major surprise if he does not. I don't think he's going to make the opening day roster, barring some epic spring training performance. And even then, I still think that the Mets are going to ask him to go back to AAA and continue to work. He struggled there a little bit last season. So you got the whole Jet Williams side of things, and that without even discussing Luis Angel Acuna. And who knows what's going to happen with him. And I am not going to let Luis Angel Acuna block the Mets from bringing Bo Bichette aboard to be the second baseman. And I know that if David Stearns truly wants Bichette, he will not let Acuna block that. But all this to say, there's a handful of guys who are on the current roster that play second base. In the case of Jet Williams, who is coming up, who the Mets have a lot of hope placed in to be a big-time contributor coming up from the farm system. In addition, of course, to Brett Baty. So there are a lot of moving parts, and it's very difficult to predict. You got Brett Baty, who split time at third and at second, had a really strong second half. What happens with Mark Vientos? What happens with Pete Alonso? All of these things are connected, whether we realize it or not. Because if Pete Alonso is gone, does that move Mark Vientos to first base? And then is Brett Baty going to be the everyday third baseman? All of these things are intertwined and can change how the Mets approach this offseason. But I want to quickly get into Jet Williams. First, let me go back to the chat over here. Damon, yeah, I think his dad gets the nod as the better player as far as Bo and Dante. Yeah, it's got to go to Dante. Like I said, the power hitter, prolific power. Again, played at Coors Field, but even if you put Bo Bichette in Coors Field for 81 home games, I don't think he's getting close to 35, 40 home runs the way that Dante could. Mark Rapp, Bellinger. By the way, Mark Rapp, my man, what is up? How you doing? Bellinger fits so many of the Mets' needs and allows so many players to get days off to DH like Nimmo, Pete, and Soto. Sign him first. Guys, I've been beating the Bellinger drum since the day the Mets were eliminated. I just dropped another video on it today. You could check that out. It's just a little 1 minute short. Bellinger is the apple of my eye this offseason. I mean, he is such a perfect fit for this Mets team. And I break it down in the video that I just posted about a half hour ago where I recap David Stearns speaking at the GM meetings. He is just such a perfect fit, Cody Bellinger, for the Mets. He plays all three outfield positions. He plays first base. And even if Pete Alonso does re-sign with the Mets, I still want them to go get Cody Bellinger. As Mark Rapp just said, here's my plan. I'll just tell it to you really quick, and I break this down in that video that you guys can watch. If Carson Bench is ready to be the opening day center fielder, great. If he's not, then you have Cody Bellinger begin the season in center field. And then if Carson Bench has a really torrid start to his time in AAA, then you can move Cody Bellinger to left field to get Brandon Nimmo off his feet, allow him to DH. You could put him in right field where we got to stop pretending like this isn't an issue. Juan Soto is not a good defensive right fielder. We know this, and we hope that he can get better, but it's probably not going to happen. And then at first base, even with Pete Alonso aboard, what did David Stearns say after the season ended? The Mets need to be better defensively. They need to improve in their run prevention department. And defensively at first base, Pete is not the worst, but he is certainly far from the best, especially in terms of his throws. And Cody Bellinger would go a long way toward, one, I think making Pete more productive at the plate, and two, improving the defense at first base. I'm with you, Mark, 100%. If there's one guy on the free agent market I want the Mets to sign, it is Cody Bellinger. Amon Ohtani won the MVP unanimous, of course, because he's Ohtani and he plays on the Dodgers, so shocker. If he was on the Mets, we know he wouldn't. Armand, they should just cut McNeil because the news of him having surgery procedure, I don't see a team trading for him. I mean, you got to try to shop McNeil around, see what you could get for him. Like, you might as well give it a shot and see if you could pay down a lot of that contract. I don't think it's a whole lot, maybe like 13, 14 million or something like that for Jeff McNeil this next season. I could be wrong, but I know it's in the double digits. I don't think it's any higher than that. So look, if you can find a willing trade partner, then yes, I'd love to get rid of Jeff McNeil. Otherwise, I would have no problem cutting him either. I mean, Steve Cohen is about to sell a gold toilet for $10 million apparently. So there's your Jeff McNeil cash right there. Tatsuya Mai, the internet gods are blessing Tony with good internet right now. Thank you. Thank you to the internet gods. Yes, I appreciate it. Sometimes it just needs to get off the runway and then we are good to go. Guys, sound off. Let me know. What do you want the Mets to do this offseason? We're just getting started. Free agency, I don't believe is officially began yet. I thought it was 5 days after the World Series, but I could be wrong. But let me know. Trades, free agents, everything's on table here. We're going to talk about it all. But let me go back over here because we were talking about Bichette and I was saying some of the roadblocks to him becoming the Mets second baseman. And I said one of them was Jet Williams. So let's take a look at Jet Williams. We know that the Mets drafted him. I believe it was in the 2018 draft in the first round. What's going on here? Do we have this or what? Yeah, I believe that's what it was. No, maybe, possibly. Yeah, we don't need to go through all of that. I'd like to, but we're not going to. All right, let's take a look. Okay, maybe not. This is just really not helpful. MLB.com, I've said it before, guys. The absolute worst when it comes to me trying to do a live stream. They hate me. They are absolutely off. All right, give me a second here to get, you know what? We're going to go back. Jet Williams. Let's do this. Here we go. Jet Williams. Oh, there we go. Wouldn't that have been nice on the first try? Yeah, no, maybe not. All right, so Jet Williams is one of the Mets' top 5 prospects, as we know. Second baseman. He has spent some time in the outfield as well, but profiles mostly as a second baseman. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He's a small guy. He's 5'7", okay? Like, you know, a lot of people are giving him the Jose Altuve comps, and that's fine and all, but look, he's kind of got the odds stacked against him, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen for him. I'm just saying he's probably going to have a tough time hitting for a lot of power in the big leagues. But despite that, I mean, has flashed some real potential in a lot of different ways. This past season, hit 17 home runs, 52 RBIs, and ended up swiping 34 bags over 130 games between Double and Triple A. Most of that coming in Double A with Binghamton. 96 games this past season with Binghamton. And Triple A struggled a little bit, which is kind of to be expected. That's the biggest jump from Double A to Triple A, of course, as we know in the minor leagues. The same thing happened to Carson Bench, who is the Mets' number 2 prospect out in center field. But in Triple A this year, Jet Williams, 34 games. Let's see, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, and did end up stealing, how many bags? It doesn't really matter, but 2 stolen bases. The whole point here, Jet Williams is a speed demon. He is a defensive specialist at second base. He can play some outfield, and he puts the ball in play. So the Mets are hoping that will translate. But the reason I bring up Jet, and we go in depth on Jet a little bit more than we did on Luis Angel Acuna or on Brett Beatty or on Jeff McNeil. We know all about those guys and their game already. In terms of Jet Williams, if the Mets do in fact sign Bo Bichette this offseason, I think it tells us the entire direction that they're planning on going in during the winter. Because if the Mets are willing to spend big-time cash on big-time free agents, that opens the door for the Mets to move a guy like Jet Williams in a trade to acquire a big-name starting pitcher. If Steve Cohen and David Stearns are willing to just put the money out there for another big guy like they have done so many times over the past couple of off seasons, it gives the Mets the opportunity to explore a trade for Tariq Skubal, to explore a trade for, Freddie Peralta, to explore a trade for any of the big name big name starting pitchers that are on the trade market. Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, not exactly a big name, not someone I would want to see the Mets sending Jet Williams out for, but to me, and I don't like a quick fix, I don't, but prospects in Major League Baseball are about as finicky as they come in any of the 4 major sports here in North America. And if you have the opportunity to go get the proven MLB MVP caliber player that just hit huge hits and home runs in the World Series in the form of Bo Bichette for simply cash, I am willing to do that. And if you can then parlay Jet Williams in a package along with some of the other prospects that maybe just aren't a fit into the Mets' future for a guy like Skubal or a guy like Peralta, that is how I think you make this a winning team for 2026. And I say this because how much more patience does Steve Cohen really have? Is he really going to be okay with the Mets missing the playoffs in 2026 after the embarrassment that they just had in 2025? Let's be honest. Look at the 5 years of Steve Cohen. This all coming after he was introduced as the owner of the team back in 2021. And he said he'd like to win a World Series within the first 3 to 5 years. And I never took that as anything too big of a deal. Like, it was to put out a goal, but he didn't demand it. And I wasn't going to get hung up on it if the Mets didn't get it. Here's my issue, though. 3 out of the 5 years that Steve Cohen has been the owner of the Mets have missed the playoffs. I mean, That's a 60% failure rate. 60% of the time, the Mets have not made the playoffs with Steve Cohen as the owner of this franchise. And I know if I'm upset about it, and if you guys are upset about it, that Steve Cohen is downright pissed off about it. So my point here is, can we really wait to see if Jet Williams is going to be capable of producing on the major league roster in an everyday role? Or do you want to just go out and get the proven commodity in Bichette, spend the money? Exchange Jet Williams for a big name pitcher, something they obviously sorely lacked in the rotation this past year. So I'm just kind of going off on an addendum here, but I think that's a clear path that the Mets could take. I'm not saying it's the one they are going to take. I'm not even saying it's the one they should take. I'm just kind of breathing life into some different avenues that the Mets can take this offseason to try to get back onto that World Series path. Let me go to the chat here. Armand McNeil's making $15 million. Yes, I knew it was close to there, so thank you, Armand. Tatsuya Mai, the internet, or I'm sorry, you got that one. Damon, yes, sir, signed Cody Tadad, signed Cody yesterday, man. If he was available and when they were ready to sign him, I would do it. Yeah, Armand, you are right. Free agency has begun, but we all know signings and trades don't happen until we get close to the winter meetings. Exactly. Tatsuya, I'll be heartbroken if the Mets let Alonso and Diaz walk, but the Mets need to get younger. And that was one of the things that David Stern said in his time with the press at the GM meetings. He said basically there are some young players on this team and on on the horizon coming up through the farm system that we need to give opportunities to play. And I don't lift my nose at it. Is that the expression? Point my nose? I don't remember the expression. I don't say it's a bad thing to think that, but coming off of the season we just had and the collapse at the end over those final couple of months, that is the last thing Mets fans want to hear. We don't want to hear the young players need to play. I mean, of course, if they're going to come up and instantly produce, but more often than not, that is not the case. They are to be determined. That is how you can label almost every prospect in Major League Baseball, even what seems like the most sure prospect of all time. You just never know what you're going to get. So, yeah, I'd like, in a perfect world, to see Jet Williams and Carson Bench come up and produce at the levels like they have in Double and Triple A. But that does not always work out in the big leagues. So David Stearns has said that, yes, they do need to get younger. I think that is why you definitely will not see Jeff McNeil on this roster next year. Pete Alonso, I mean, it's 50-50, man. It's a coin flip for me with Pete Alonso. I love Pete. I love that he, loves being a Met, and he's the all-time home run leader in franchise history, and I would hope that he's only ever in the orange and blue for his entire career. But I'm just going to say this. Sentimentality does not win World Series. It doesn't. I'm sorry. Look at what happened with the Nationals and with Bryce Harper. Harper ditched them for the Phillies. I don't know if the Nationals were ever serious about really re-signing him or if he just had some crazy contract demands. The second he bolted for Philly, the Nationals won the World Series in 2019. Now, you don't just do it because you let a big star go, and it's not like they came back and spent that money on huge prospects, but they had a good up-and-coming team, and they were able to make it work. They obviously still had Scherzer and Strasburg, and they had Patrick Corbin in the first year of that contract. So, actually, that was probably their biggest deal in lieu of signing Harper. But my point here is you don't win a World Series because it feels warm and fuzzy to have Pete Alonso at first base. And I'm not saying Pete is not a great player, and I'm not saying I don't want Pete back. I'm just saying if the contract demands are going to affect the rest of this roster, the rest of this team, and their ability to field a World Series caliber squad, then I'm sorry, but Pete, they have to go. Diaz, again, I say the same thing for him, but I do believe it is very important that the Mets find a way to bring Edwin Diaz back. It is so rare you find a closer that can finish games in New York. We know he has been through the gutter and back with this franchise since getting traded here in 2019. So few New York athletes are capable of that. I really would love to have Edwin Diaz back. I think he is ultra important to this team and this bullpen. And we'll see what happens with here. Apparently he's hoping to get another record-setting contract like he did sign with the Mets in 2022. Armand, oh Christ, Woody Johnson is at the game tonight. I saw that just now, Armand. I can't believe I'm watching the Jets. This is just such a horrible idea for my blood pressure, but here we are again, right? Tatsuya Mai, the dog is pissed at the Mets too. Yeah, Mookie's always barking about the Mets. He might be barking about the Jets actually right now. Let's see. Damon says, Cody, just don't do any Canseco McGuire arm bashing if you get signed by us. Yeah, how weird is that? And I think it was Kike Hernandez who we did the arm bash celebration with after touching home plate after a homer. And he ended up having that major shoulder injury or something like that, right? And that really kind of derailed his career. You know, he has bounced back and turned into a really solid player, of course, and we know the defensive versatility he brings. You know, the one downside of Cody Bellinger being on the Mets is him being a lefty. Of course, we know already we got Francisco Lindor, switch hitter, who hits much better from the left side and hits the majority of his at-bats from the left side with more right-handed pitchers. And then Brandon Nimmo, who we also learned about today, could be traded, which was not a shock to me, but I don't really think it's realistic. But we heard Joel Sherman said that at least one AL executive said that the Mets are, at the very least, spitballing the idea of trading Brandon Nimmo and how much of his contract they would have to eat to make that happen. We know he has 5 years left at $20 million a pop, so 5 years, $125 million. We also know Nimmo has a no trade clause. And Sherman actually said that according to what he heard, it's not particularly because of his performance, at least not at the plate, but the steps he has taken back in the outfield. We know left field, he has definitely struggled. He has had the foot, the knee injuries, all of those things over the last couple of years. He looked really bad out there. I won't go through the metrics, but just the eye test could tell you Brandon Nimmo did not look swift of foot out in left field this past season. So with all that being said, and the Mets looking for roster versatility, roster flexibility, Brandon Nimmo would actually be the ideal guy to ship out. That being said, how do you replace him? I mean, is Bo Bichette that guy? I don't know. And do you want to commit that contract to him? You'll be in the same boat maybe 4 years from now with Bo Bichette. So if you can find a team, I'm open to the idea of it as long as I could see the trade on paper first before I sign off on it. Guys, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. I know I'm just rambling right here, but I wanted to do a live stream. It's been a while. I'm trying to get more consistent with them, at least one a week, but still pumping out a couple shorts a day for you guys. Still doing some long form videos now, at least 2 a week. So really appreciate it. Like I said, just did one, posted about an hour ago about David Stern's comments at the GM meetings. Be sure to check that out and leave this video a like. Go ahead and do that right now. Really appreciate it. And tell your friends, any Mets fans in your life, share this video with them, share one of my other ones with them, get them aboard. I'm trying to hit my goal, 5,000 subscribers before opening day next season. I wanted to do that before the end of 2025, but I think that's a little lofty. But hey, if we can make it happen, all the credit to you guys. Appreciate everybody being here. Carlos Ortiz. Hey, Tony. What is up, Carlos? How you doing, man? Good to see you here. How you doing? Tell me. I want to hear from everybody. Again, I'm going to be watching the Jets here, and that's why Mookie's barking, I think, Damon. Poor doggy, he says. Damon, I was beyond disappointed how the season ended. Boy, oh boy. I mean, it was brutal, man. It was brutal. And, you know, I'm numb to it at this point, and I said that many times during the season that I just got numb to it, you know, probably around August. I thought they might have slithered out of that hole that they were stuck in the middle of July, and then it just kept going up and down, and the downs were worse than the ups, and it was just a really, really brutal year, Damon, no doubt about it. I had to stay away from anything Mets for a while after the season ended. I didn't want to hear or talk a damn word. Damon, I could not relate any more to you than I am right now. I have said and done that so many times before doing the podcast and the channel here. If the Mets had a season like that, I just had to get them off of all my social media. I just couldn't take it. I just had to unfollow. I just had to mute. I couldn't listen or just think about the Mets or the Jets or the Knicks or any of my teams when they've had heartbreakers like this past year for the Mets. So I totally understand. Unfortunately, me trying to make this podcast take off and the channel here take off, I had to stay in tune to the very end and see all of the shrapnel and the aftermath of this past year. So I get it. Let's see. Armand, no team is taking on that contract. No. And so, like I said, Joel Sherman said about Nimmo, the Mets' internal discussions were not, hey, should we trade him or should we not? No, the discussion was, how much of his contract would we have to eat for another team to be willing to acquire him? So, yeah, I agree. As it stands, 5 years, $125 million. No team is taking on that full contract. Definitely not. But if the Mets were to eat some of that deal, looks like much more appealing kind of contract for what I think is still a quality player that just set a career high in home runs with 25 this past season. And I say all of this without mentioning I love Brandon Nimmo. I don't want Brandon Nimmo to get traded, but if it's what's best for this team and its future, I am open-minded to the idea of it, and I am glad that the Mets are doing their due diligence about it. So we will see. And don't forget, no trade clause on Brandon Nimmo. I don't even know if he would be willing to waive it, but depending on the situation, maybe Colorado grew up playing, or at least going to Rockies games on occasion, coming from Cheyenne, Wyoming, his home. So yeah, I don't know. We will see. Armand, Nimmo should be the everyday DH. Yeah, look, that's the hard part about this roster and why it's so tough to tell what the Mets are going to do or what they are going to look like in 2026, because there are probably two players at the very least on this roster right now that should be everyday DHs. I'll actually mark that up to 3. Nimmo could probably be an everyday DH the way he moves in the outfield nowadays. Mark Vientos, if he could ever hit again like 2024, is your perfect DH because he's an absolute butcher in the field. And then Pete Alonso, if he re-signs with the Mets, should be DHing more often. That without mentioning Juan Soto, who is serviceable in right field, but obviously not great. And I think his future is as a DH, maybe the next 2 to 3 years. That's something that happens. So the Mets want to maintain this roster flexibility, and I think that is actually a huge reason why the murmurs about them potentially shipping Nimmo out in the first place have come up here this week, because they don't have enough DH spots for the amount of bodies they got on this team as it's currently constructed. We will see if that changes 2-3 months from now and heading into next season. I think it's going to be a very different looking team. I think this roster is going to look massively different from what we saw at the end of 2025. Damon, so being a free agent, can Toronto match a deal that he is offered? Yeah, I mean, they can. It's not one of those situations like in the NBA where they can match and then he has to return to his original team. It's just a matter of, if the Toronto Blue Jays match, say, the Mets offer, then it's up to Bichette which team he would want to go to. Maybe the Mets then move the offer up, or maybe Toronto bumps up their pay. But it's not like one of those NBA or NFL things where, you match the offer of the original team and then he has to go back to that team. And I don't even bother with the NBA and the NFL cap and all that crap and the birds' rights and whatever. That's just too much for me. I think it's so silly. But yeah, in baseball, obviously, there's no like matching thing or, contract sheet, poison pill, none of that kind of stuff. I'm on Damon. Yes, they can, because the Jays ownership is a big corporation that can afford it. Okay, so if you meant, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to diminish your baseball acumen in any way, Damon. I think I misunderstood your question. I think, can they financially, is it affordable to them? Yes, they can. And they tried to sign Ohtani. They just gave that big contract to Vladdy for $500 million. So in terms of ability to match it, yes, absolutely. And especially coming off the World Series, him being a homegrown Blue Jay, I absolutely would see the Blue Jays ponying up whatever it takes to retain Bo Bichette. Yes, definitely 100%. And Damon says, so it seems the only way Bo can end up in New York is if Toronto just gives him away and wants to come to New York. This is going to be interesting. It will, absolutely. Bichette obviously played his whole career there with Toronto, and just coming off the World Series. Travis Jankowski on my screen. Wow, it's not something I was expecting at all. But yeah, I mean, it's all going to depend on, I think what the Jays offer, what other teams are offering, how Bichette feels about moving off of shortstop. Is that something the Blue Jays want him to do as well? So I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. And look, if I woke up tomorrow and I find out that Bo Bichette re-signed with the Jays, I won't be disappointed. I mean, it would have been nice, but I do think it's kind of a pipe dream for the Mets in the first place. Now, if he signs with the Atlanta Braves or the Dodgers, that's going to be a huge problem for me. I am not going to be able to sleep if Bo Bichette joins one of our National League rivals. But if he returns to the Blue Jays, if he signed with the Astros, something like that, where it won't affect the Mets, I can understand it, and I'm not going to get upset with the Mets front office for not ponying up. But these things can change. We can flip on a dime as a Mets fans, as you guys all know. Guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. It's been a really fun 50 minutes or so. Really appreciate you all being in here. And like I said, I am hoping to be doing this on every Thursday night or maybe every Wednesday. I don't know. We're still figuring out the schedule here, but you can always count on my stream or on my shorts couple of those daily, my long form videos that are coming out now, 1 or 2 a week. And then, as you guys may have seen before, like the video about the 1992 Mets and my Bobby Valentine video essays, which I am going to be working on here as well. So taking deep dives into Mets history. So if you have an idea for one, I would love to hear it. Drop a comment on what I should do next. Like I said, I did the 1992 Mets, the worst money could buy. It's too early to do one on the 2025 Mets as the next version of the worst team that money could buy. So that's one that's probably a couple years away still, but give me an idea for a Mets video essay and I will work on it if it sounds like a good plan. But otherwise, guys, appreciate y'all being here. Off season's underway. We'll see how long until it actually starts heating up on the hot stove. But thank you all so much. Leave this video a like on your way out, and I will talk with you guys next time. Until then, though, I'm Tony Metro. Stay true to the orange and blue.